What's up, barbecue people? Welcome back to Amateur Backyard Barbecue. My name is Adam Brucass. Last week we tried to cook a picanha, and it maybe didn't go quite as well as it could have. But this week, we're going to try and cook a whole beef tri-tip, and I haven't really quite decided how I'm going to do it yet, so we'll see how it goes. This video is sponsored by me! Go and stream my new album now. If you're a country fan, maybe you like a bit of Luke Combs or Justin Moore, or a fan of classic rock, maybe you're a Bon Jovi fan, any of those guys is going to be the album for you. It's on Spotify, it's on iTunes, Apple Music. You'll be doing me a huge favor, especially if you like the song you just heard in the intro, because there's actually a track from the album. Here we have our beef tri-tip. It says on the packet that it is prime grade. Now, I don't know how accurate that is. I am in the UK. Don't know if that really means USDA prime or whatever. But it does look like it's got some nice marbling in there. Let's open it up and take a look. Use the old Chud style dry pat. Now, I've got to be honest, this is an ugly looking piece of meat. It does look like a tri-tip, you got your 3 points, but there's also a lot of extra little bits that I think I'm going to have to clean off if I want to get a good cook on this thing. So I'm not going to waste any time, I'm just going to go straight in and start trimming this thing up. Get rid of some of this. And this butchering work is worse than mine. Alright folks, I've trimmed this thing down about as much as I would care to. If I trim any more, I'm not going to have any left. I have taken almost 50%, probably around 50% of the meat of this thing off, just to get it looking a little bit more pretty and aerodynamic to throw on the smoker. All this has had to come off, and I'm still not entirely convinced that this is the cut of meat that it says on the packet. If there's any barbecue experts out there that can tell me if I am in fact correct, if this is just a really weird looking tri-tip, or if they've given me something else, like a piece of a brisket or something, let me know in the comments, and I'll be sure to chase up the supplier. There's a lot of fat here that I think I could use, so I'm going to separate as much of it as I can and boil it down into tallow. As usual, our first step is going to be to do a dry brine on this. If you don't know what a dry brine is by now, it just means we're going to cover it in salt, put it in the fridge uncovered overnight, and the salt is going to get absorbed into the meat and get some nice flavour all the way through. Good old sea salt flakes. As always, got to get that even coverage. Don't really need to worry too much about over salting a piece of meat this size. Getting in there with the sea salt flakes. I like the flakes because you can kind of crumble them up in your fingers while you pour it, sprinkle it, or whatever you want to call it. Flipping it over. Get those sides as well. Just like that, in the fridge she goes overnight to brine and do her thing. Good morrow, barbecue people. Welcome to day 2 of our tri-tip cook. Let's see how she's looking. Alright, this thing's looking pretty good. We got that nice deep dark red color, which means the salt has got in there and done its job. Now, I said earlier that I wasn't really sure how I was going to cook this thing, but looking at some of the marbling we have in here, I still don't know if it's really prime grade, but there is definitely a lot of intermuscular fat that we might be able to use to our advantage here. So what I think I am actually going to do this time is try and cook this thing low and slow like a brisket. I don't really have any idea of how long it might take to do that, given its size. So I'll probably try and keep it at a reasonable temperature, maybe around 225, 250. Keep probe testing it, keep checking on it every now and then, and just make sure that it's not drying out. First things first, let's get a bit of a binder on this thing. It's going to need it because the surface has dried out where we dry brined it in the fridge overnight. And a binder is just going to help the seasoning to stick a little better. It also helps to develop the bark a little bit more as well. It gives the smoke something more to stick to. Classic French's yellow mustard. Doesn't matter if you don't like mustard, you won't be able to taste it. But if you really don't want to use it, if you're allergic to it or whatever, you can use mayonnaise, you can use hot sauce, you can use barbecue sauce, pretty much whatever you want, ketchup. As long as it's something tacky, you could even use water if you really wanted to. Some of that on there. Just work that into the surface, get it nice and covered. You don't need too much. This is probably a little bit too much for one side. Just need enough to create a nice tacky wet surface for the rub to stick to. Flip it over. This is the underside, so we're going to apply the rub to this side first. It's also important to note on a tri-tip, if that is what this is, that the grain structure changes halfway across, not unlike a brisket. See, up this end, the grain goes this way, and then all the way down here, it's traveling a completely different direction. So when we come to slice this, we're gonna have to remember where the grain goes, in which direction at each end, cut it in half and rotate the right pieces to cut against the grain so we get that nice tender bite. You know, one day I might get into doing some more complicated rubs on things, where I'm just kind of experimenting today with the meat. I don't know if you guys can hear this, but there is a scrap collector outside with a megaphone demanding people come out and give him scrap metal. I'm just gonna wait for him to leave. As I was saying, one day I might try experimenting with some different rubs on things, but today I'm really just trying to get to grips with this cut of meat because I've never done one before. So once again, we're keeping it simple with Texas style, coarse black pepper and granulated garlic. Yes, Mr. Scrapman, we can hear you. Jeez, I wish that guy would shut up. Anyway, we're going in nice and heavy with the pepper, as usual. Give plenty of surface area for that smoke to stick to. Garlic granules. Get that on there. Presentation side. There you go, folks. What a beautiful sight this is. A nice, even coat all the way around. I'm just going to let this thing sit for a little while so the rub can have time to set before we throw it on the pit in a little bit. The rub is on, you guys know what that means. It's time to get a fire going! So I went camping at the weekend and I just realized that I think I left my good barbecue tongs behind. So it's gonna be fun tending the fire today without those. Folks, our tri-tip is on the pit and we're just going to keep a very, very close eye on her for the next few hours. I really don't know how long I'm expecting this to take. If I had to guess, I'd probably say maybe 2-3 hours. I probably wouldn't want to keep it on any longer than that for fear of it drying out. Once I feel like it's had enough time on the pit, it's got a good bark on there, we'll take it off, give it the old Texas crutch, wrap it in tin foil, throw in some of the beef tallow that I made out of the fat we trimmed off yesterday, stick it in the oven for a little while, on a low heat, just to let all that fat render down and all that collagen melt down into gelatin. It can be very difficult to control the temperature on such a cheap offset smoker. My philosophy tends to be using the pit to get the smoke and the flavor onto the meat and then finishing the cook in the oven, bringing it up to temperature properly so you know that it's cooked through. But we just use the pit to begin with for the first few hours to get that smoke flavor and that fire flavor onto the meat. At just about 2 hours into this cook, we've hit a bit of a stall at about 149 degrees Fahrenheit. It's just been sitting at that temperature for about the last half an hour, so I'm thinking it might be time to wrap her up soon. But I'm going to give it a little bit longer and give that bark a bit more time to develop while keeping a close eye on the temperature to make sure that we don't dry it out too much. Now I've managed to keep the temperature under control a little bit better today by, rather than using small wood splits and trying to keep the fire small, I've just been building a slightly larger fire and leaving the firebox open to the air. That way you're not getting a huge load of really intense heat flowing all the way through the smoker. Instead, you're only sort of getting an indirect heat from the fire, but it's still getting plenty of smoke and plenty of heat traveling through. But by doing that, I've managed to keep the temperature up between sort of 200 and 225, which is a difficult thing to do when it's 27 degrees outside and you've got a very cheap smoker made of very thin metal. Okie dokie folks, this thing has just come off the pit. It's been on for a grand total of just about 2.5 hours. You can see the bark has developed a lovely color and a lovely texture. It's peaking in some parts at around sort of the high 150 degrees Fahrenheit range, which to me says it's just about time to wrap it up. In here we have the beef tallow that I made yesterday from all the trimmings of this beautiful piece of meat. If you'd like to know how to make beef tallow out of beef trimmings, go and check out my video on beef short ribs. I'll put a link down below. But it's very easy to do and it's very, very handy for when you want to wrap something. Just warmed this up in the pan to make it pourable And I'm just gonna pour it over the top. Yum, 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 yum. There's a whole lot of beef tallow, so let's get this thing wrapped up before it starts to flood everywhere. Okay, we got this thing wrapped up nice and tight, so I'm going to throw it in the oven at around 110 degrees Fahrenheit, something like that. Just basically to continue the cooking process, make sure all that lovely fat in there renders down. Wrapping it in foil will also help to steam the meat and soften it up a little bit. We'll throw it in, check on it in about an hour or so, and see how it looks. Alrighty folks, after an hour and a half in the oven at about 120 degrees Fahrenheit, I did put the temperature up a little bit. She's probing at around 203 degrees, which is pretty damn perfect. I've taken it out of the oven just to cool down for about half an hour or so, just to stop the cooking process, and then I'll be putting it back in the oven. And then what I think I'm gonna do is a long heated rest, not quite as long as overnight like we've done with some other stuff, but just for a few hours until dinner time. It's currently just gone 3 o'clock, so I'm probably gonna hold it until about 5. Alright folks, this thing has just been resting in the oven for a few hours, but it is finally time to cut into it and see how it came out. I'm fairly confident, but we'll see. Ta-da! Look at that. Looks pretty damn good. First thing we've got to do is work out which direction the grain goes in. If I remember correctly, was one going this way and one going that way. But just to be sure, I'm going to cut it in half, just about where it starts to angle off about here. Just going to go straight in like that. That looks pretty damn good to me. Got a very nice smoke ring on there, and it looks pretty juicy. It's hot, I can tell you that much. It's tender. And it's good. Having never cooked a brisket before, I'm incredibly happy with how it came out. And if I cooked a brisket, I hope it would come out something like this. That's what I kind of always imagined it would be like. Seems to hold up pretty well. Nice 1/4 inch slices. The real test is going to be this piece with the long slices. The smoke ring goes all the way through. Let's try and get a long slice off of this piece. I mean, that is pretty much all smoke ring, which is pretty cool. I'm quite happy with that. It's holding itself together, but it's still tender enough to just pull apart. Texture-wise, it's kind of like corned beef. If you're in the UK and you've ever had corned beef just from a packet from a supermarket, it kind of tastes like that. But I am pretty damn happy with this result. Look at that. A great color on there. It's nice and tender. It's pulling apart nice and easy. Well folks, there you have it. A tri-tip smoked kind of like a brisket. Even if you've never cooked a brisket before in your life, it shows it can be done, and it can be done on a cheap offset smoker. Until next time. Go and stream my new album. Now!